Hi, and welcome everybody. Welcome to Entrepreneur Close-Up, where we get up close and personal with entrepreneurs around the globe. Thank you for joining us. Today we will be speaking with Tim Turner with Turner & Son Homes. Tim is a home builder with over 20 years of experience. He's the son in Turner & Son Homes, and he's the CEO who still works with his partner, Ben, his father, who has been building since 1964. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So Tim and I have known each other for a long time. We go way back to the Oklahoma City Boat Club. Yes, there is a boat club in Oklahoma City. It is not a yacht club. So we both had sailboats, or his family was known for having a trimaran on the lake. But I haven't seen you out there in a while. Tim, what's going on?
Well, my dad kind of took that over. So he goes to that lake and I go to a different lake a lot. We just do different things. So, but it's still fun. I just haven't been in a while.
It's a good lake. It's fun. But I think you like the motorboats more than the sailboats, right?
we do. I don't know why. I grew up sailing, but when you have a little kid, well, my kids aren't little now, but when you have little kids, the sailboat isn't really a good, it's not a good platform. So
you can't water ski behind it?
No. Well, maybe. If the wind's blowing hard enough, you could.
Yeah, I know, Oklahoma, you can. All right. So Tim is a big fan of professional development. We really got to know each other better when we joined a business group together called the Alternative Board, which is a peer-to-peer peer group advisory group. And then he introduced me to Darren Hardy, who is a success mentor. And so we've kind of had some similar business paths over the years. I personally think a lot of Tim's success can be attributed to the professional development that he invests in. And having watched him over the years, he doesn't just passively learn. He works to implement what he has learned. And I think that's attributed to has contributed to his success. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Yeah, I would say that. You realize as an entrepreneur, how many skills you just don't learn in school or otherwise. A lot of times when you have just a job, essentially, there are a lot of things you don't learn, and you got to learn them, and you'll learn them one way or another, the hard way or the not as hard way. So
might as well go the not as hard way.
Right.
Okay. So let's dive in. Tell us your story. I like to hear how people became entrepreneurs. Some people planned it. Some people kind of got thrust into it. So tell us about how you became an entrepreneur.
Well, like you said, I don't think there's any set path or whatever. I graduated from college with a degree in mechanical engineering and promptly went into the Marines. Spent 4 years doing that. And when I got out, I found a job working for a big heat and air equipment manufacturer, and as an engineer. And I remember there was an event. I worked there about 4 years, and there was, maybe a couple of events when I realized, essentially, I just don't make a very good employee, especially if the company's value system doesn't match mine. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a mismatch. And I remember my manager coming to me one day and say, "Hey, I got a really exciting engineering project for you. Come on, I'm going to show you." We go down the tool and die room, and he proceeds to tell me how I don't remember the accounting of it, but this is a publicly traded company. And he said, we're going to shift the tool and die tools, the little parts and pieces, from one part of the financials to the other, and it's going to make our stock price go up. And I thought, I don't think this is what I signed up for. So that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. So I realized I needed to do something. I just needed to do something on my own. It's just my temperament. I guess wanting to look for the easy path rather than start my own, I talked my dad into selling me half of his home building company. So that way I at least didn't have to start from scratch, but I felt like I had some skills I could contribute. And
for the non-engineers out there, what does that mean? They shifted the tool die, and why did that tell you that was not for you?
Oh, sorry. Well, so there are tools in the tool room in the factory, and they're either somebody's going to chat in and tell me how goofed up I have this, but they're either on the they're either expensed as an expense to the company, or they're on the balance sheet. And if they're not an expense, then it makes your net income go up. And if you are a publicly traded company, the more you higher your net income, then the better your stock price is. We weren't doing anything physical. We weren't making air conditioners better. We weren't making more of them or making them cost less or anything or selling more. We were just shifting numbers around on paper. And that was the result that my boss was after. And I just couldn't imagine spending my time doing that. It didn't seem productive.
Right.
So anyway, that was my path. And like I said, I talked my dad into that. It took me a while to talk him into it. It was probably a year or so before he succumbed.
You wore him down enough?
I wore him down. Yeah. That's what you can do. So that was kind of my path. I didn't, I don't know if I wasn't creative enough or not brave enough or whatever to do to start my own, to do a startup. So and I think I'm better naturally suited for making improvements to something that exists than creating something new. So that was probably a good thing, but that's what I did. I started with him it was in 99.
Very good. So how was that working with your dad? Family owned business, all smooth sailing. We all get along.
Oh yeah. Piece of cake. What could possibly go wrong? That's one of my favorite sayings. What could possibly go wrong? No, it probably worked better than it had any right to. He and I originally thought, I mean, obviously known him my whole life. He'd known me my whole life. I thought we were very much alike, and in some regards we are, but I also realized how different we are in a sort of a complementary fashion, not in a conflicting fashion. And so not knowing that going in, I mean, that's just pure luck, right? But fortunately, his ego wasn't so bound to the business that he couldn't let go of things. And so that helped the transition. I've always heard that that's a problem in a lot of businesses, transitioning within a family. Somebody's done things a certain way their whole lives. And I mean, he'd been building homes for 40 years by that time, or almost 40, but it's a long time, and it'd been his business the whole time. He didn't have to, have a partner or whatever. So, but there are still things that are tough on the transition. He's a numbers guy. He's more accounting driven than I am. And so it's been a struggle to adopt new practices and that sort of thing. But I think you run into that with anybody, not just a family member.
Sure. You're definitely going to have issues with any kind of partners or employees. You just don't always have to have Christmas dinner with those people.
That's true. And okay. So you bring up a good point. That's from the personal family side. We had to have a rule that we didn't talk about business at Christmas dinner or, Sunday dinner or any kind of family event. And there were always things that did creep in there. That you just have to be disciplined about it. Have an agreement about it. Be disciplined about it. I think the one thing that's tough, that has become tougher in recent years is in there have been conflicts, and I've realized that your family member is always your family member, whether they're your business partner or not. And you really have to be careful and put that first. And remember that's really the prime relationship. So anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's important to make that commitment that family comes first, no matter what's going on in the business. So, and not everybody can do that. So you referenced a little bit the transition of power. Let's go into a little bit more detail on what happened. You got older, your dad got older, we all get older. And so he started moving out of the business. You were taking a greater role in the running of it. So talk about how that went and what happened there.
Well, the plan, and we kind of formulated a plan at the very beginning that I would take over sooner rather than later, whatever take over means, in terms of running the day-to-day part of the business, in home building, especially in a small business, you wear multiple hats. So the first thing I had to do was learn how to build a house. and then learn how to build multiple houses. And so I did that and just took over that part of the business early on. And then we made, just in terms of, legalese, it's a corporate entity. And so I became the president and he became the secretary, so we could sign papers and all that kind of stuff in a certain way. I'm going through, building in neighborhoods, the traditional kind of building in a subdivision where you buy lots as a builder, you buy finished lots and build houses on them. That requires relationships with developers and banks, because you've got to be able to borrow money to build the houses, unless you're independently wealthy, and not anybody had that much money would go into home building. So, I mean, I certainly wouldn't. No, I'm just kidding. So he had those relationships, and I was obviously introduced to them and built some of my own. And that was, I'd say maybe the transition was more the business relationships from him, or his transfer of trust or whatever to me building my own, separate from his network. So that may be the biggest transition, is, I guess, building my own network, relationships, reputation, with all those strategic partnerships that you have to have.
And so from a tactical standpoint, did you buy him out completely, leave him, as an employee in the business? Are you still partners?
Yeah.
What did that on paper transfer of power, as it were, look like?
Yeah, good question. So ultimately, if we think, so from a strategic standpoint, if we think about transitioning the ownership from one partner to the other, where one of the partners is 30 years older than the other one, the assumption is that, okay, well, the assumption is he's going to go first, right? So we've got to have a transition plan where I can take his half of the business while minimizing the tax implications, if that makes sense. So you're going to pay a capital gain tax on the sale that he or his estate's going to pay capital gains tax on the sale of that business. Well, if it's 50-50 partnership, then, you have a book value or appraised value or whatever it is, and he's going to pay tax on his 50% on the gain that he makes. Well, if you take the value of the company and divide it in half, that's his half. Well, if you take a share of the business that is not a controlling interest, say 49%, that 49% is worth relatively less than just the 1% that it loses, because it's not a controlling interest. So the 51% becomes worth more than 51% of the overall value of the business. So we transferred 1%, hit 1% from him to me, so that I own 51%, a controlling interest, so that when we do transfer the remaining, there won't be as big of a tax impact, because his value will be reduced by more than just that 1 percentage point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's really relevant a lot to, a lot of businesses are transferring power as the older generation retires out. And so that's good. And as he's aged, I assume his role has changed. How have you guys dealt with the ongoing changing roles? Obviously, I think he's still involved. You've worked well to give him a place to have kind of a retirement job. What does that look like?
Well, the first thing is, I just have to preface all of that with one of the first things my mom said to me when we went into business together. She said, "Now you're not allowed to fire him, because I don't want him here all day long." So that was one of the rules that was established very early on. So interestingly enough, his role didn't change that much over the last, 15 years or so, until very recently. Now he's 83, about to be 84 years old. And so I guess it was last September. It was almost a year ago. I can't believe it was only a year ago. He got COVID and got it pretty bad, bad enough to where he was just out
Oh.
for a while. And I had to take over what he was physically doing, which was essentially keeping the books. And, when you do something, okay, that's fine to know how all that works in theory, but to actually sit down and do it
Yeah.
when you already had plenty to do anyway. So that kind of forced our hand on doing some more what I call big boy company things, like putting our QuickBooks on the cloud instead of having it in an office somewhere, hiring outside help to do things differently. So that was kind of a big, fast transition that, in hindsight, I wish I had done more of that sooner. Implemented systems,
Mm.
you built in a lot of those things that we just didn't have in place. We do now.
Well,
Got the crash course in it, but
right. Well, deadlines work, crises work. To-do list that gets done eventually gets
yep,
done a lot faster sometimes.
yeah, yeah, crisis. You're right. I mean, yeah, there's nothing like a good crisis to focus your mind, and it. You don't ever want to go through that. Nobody does, but I wouldn't trade the lessons learned for anything.
Right. Right. And I mean, you said earlier, business owners wear many hats. So sometimes there are things that need to get done that just don't get done until they absolutely have to get done. So I think that just happens.
Yes.
Okay. So you referenced earlier a shift in your business model. Let's get into that because I think that's been a fascinating journey. I got to kind of walk with you through that a little bit, but you shifted focus from building homes in established neighborhoods to what we call the scattered site model. Talk to us about that, what that looked like, what your warning signs were that made you make the shift. Tell us a little bit more.
Wow, that's there's a lot in that question that deals with a lot of different facets of the business. The okay, in the mid 2000s, we the building industry, we could sell anything. Um, I won't. There might be a polite company here. I won't say what I normally say about that, but we could sell anything, and we thought, we being the home building industry, we thought we were doing so well financially and killing it because we were so smart. Turns out that it was because the market was giving us gifts. The mid 2000s, it was crazy. It wasn't as crazy as it is now, but it was crazy in a different way. And we started to see a couple of shifts. One, when the market gets like that, the land developers have the scarcest resource. They have land and they have finished lots. The builders have to build. You have to have a lot to build a house on. So the relationships that you have with your suppliers of lots are critical, and they can pretty well set their prices. So builders get squeezed in the middle. Prices of land and availability, prices go up, availability goes down. More and more builders into the market, which actually makes the prices kind of stay stuck, where in the demand for labor and materials goes up, so your costs go up, but your prices don't go up along with it, and your margins start to shrink. Well, when your margins shrink, it leaves you less of a buffer when the market turns bad, which it did. It hit us in about 2009, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the classic. We didn't do as bad as we could have, so we survived. But we did the classic builder goes broke business model, which is buy a whole bunch of lots in advance because you have to, because there's competition and you have an agreement with the developer. And if you don't keep up with it, he'll just kick you out of the neighborhood. And then what are you going to do? So we bought a whole bunch of lots with cash that we had because we were so smart. We were making all that money, right? So when the market turned, we were caught with inventory, finished inventory that, of course, we're paying interest to the banks on, carrying cost. We were essentially out of cash because we just spent it on these lots. And turns out you can't pay interest or electric bills or anything with shovelfuls of dirt. So we were in a bind, and we had built a few homes for people on their land that they financed with their own construction loans in the past. And it worked well because we had a production builder operations systems going, but we could build in a kind of a custom environment. So it was good for the client and it was good for us. So we started to shift that direction, just out of necessity, really. We needed sales, and that shift to that business model provided us the supplement that we needed to help us survive. And then it took a few more years before we made the shift completely to building on people's land.
Now, your dad kind of saw something coming, right? He was getting anxious when all this was about to happen, you said.
Yeah. So, okay. He'd been doing this since 1964, and he says you get a downturn about I think he would always say about 6 or 7 years. And that proved true. I mean, we went, you remember the bank failures and the oil bust and all that stuff in the 80s. And then we went through another little bust in the 90s, but we missed one. We should have had one in the mid 2000s. We were killing it. And he kept saying, we're due because we've missed one. We've missed a downturn, and we got it. We just got it a little late. So yeah, he saw it. I wouldn't say he saw it coming like Crystal Ball saw it, but saw it coming as in it has to come at some point. So, and to his credit, he always played pretty conservatively. He never made the bet that if he lost it, it would cost the whole business. He always kept cash, except for that one little, well, notwithstanding the mistake I told you about, but he always, kept his cash. He always kept good relationships, and ran his business in a conservative way. So, it's one of those things that you could say you saw it coming or whatever, but I think the real lesson isn't try to guess the crystal ball or whatever. Just put yourself in a position where no matter what happens, you're not going to lose everything, and you always have a plan B. You can always shift. You can always, change gears, or, change your product line or something, but you're always kind of ready for it. I don't know if that really answers your question. I think I went a little bit off on that one.
No, that's okay. I mean, you at this point had a business on the brink of failure. So talk about what that was like. What'd that feel like?
Yeah, that's nobody wants to go through that. Anybody who goes through that will tell you the same thing. It's painful on a lot of levels. One,
when you lost all your hair? Is that what made it all?
I just, hey, if it was here, it'd be gray, I'm sure. You feel like a personal failure, for one, because you're doing so well for so long or whatever. You feel like you're failing personally. If you have to lay people off, which we did, that's terrible. That's a terrible feeling, because it's people's livelihoods and they're having to go home and tell their families. That's no good. You've got to go to your relationships, developers, and tell them, I can't keep up with my agreement. And I knew in that case that could be burning bridges that we needed down the road. Of course, you got banks, and you need banks, and that's one bill you got to pay every time. So that's the other thing that you end up doing is paying bills late. That's humbling. You go through your early life thinking you have a certain set of values, by God, you always pay your bills on time. You always do this and you always do that. And you do until you can't. And then you realize it doesn't matter how hard you try, how honest you are, how hard you work, what time you get up in the morning. Sometimes you just fail because you either didn't pivot quick enough, you didn't know, you didn't see it coming, whatever, you didn't prep for it, whatever the reason is.
Sometimes it's out of your control. Sometimes you don't. Yep. I mean, like COVID, I have a heart for all the small businesses that closed in COVID.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything wrong, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Can you imagine owning a restaurant or something like that? And then all of a sudden, maybe you were just getting your feet under you, or maybe you were just recovering from something, and and figured it out and you didn't have any reserve, and then bam, you're just done. Yeah. So
it's real. I mean, it's hard.
yeah.
So, okay. So on a more positive note, you realize what's happening. You shift to the new scattered site model. That was easy. Great transition. Wish you'd done it sooner. Everybody's living happily ever after.
Sure.
How'd that
Yeah.
transition go?
Just that easy. Well, yeah. It took a long time for several reasons. There's always the internal thought process of, well, you're still doing the same widget. I'm just building homes, right? I'm just going to shift it from this to that. Well, there are a whole bunch of logistical challenges that I never, ever saw coming. When you're building a house in a subdivision, there's dirt with well-defined edges. There's electricity, water, sewer, gas, natural gas available. It's just right there. You know who to call. It's OG&E and ONG and city or whatever, and it's easy. You know where to buy a permit? Well, then you go out to build on someone's 40 acres somewhere. First of all, you don't even know. I'm just giving you this example. But you don't even know. You can drive to it, but you don't know what town it's in. Sometimes the cities don't know what town it's in. You can go try to buy a permit and they say, yeah, that's not ours. And you say, well, it shows on the map that it is. No. So there are places you don't know where the electricity is coming from. There's a power pole out in front with wires hanging on it, and God knows who that belongs to and who you're going to call to figure that out. So there were all kinds of crazy logistical issues. Plus the bank, you learn which banks can do construction loans, which can't or don't, or think they can, but they really can't. Appraisal issues out in some of the rural areas, you have a hard time finding comps. So there were all those logistical issues on one side. And then the other side, when you're building in a subdivision, your primary advertising is the fact that you're in a neighborhood that has traffic driving by it, and it's in the right school district, and it's in the right price point, and blah, 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 blah. And you build a model home. And of course, you think as a builder, people are coming into your model home because you do such a great job building homes. It's really because they want to live there, and you're the guy who has the model home. So that's what they're talking to you. So you got to go out and figure out how do I attract new clients? I don't have a model home. Where am I going to put a model home? I'm building in an 8-county area. Where am I going to build a model home? I don't know. Build on the side of the highway. I mean, even then you're only catching a certain. So there was the whole marketing aspect of it. How do I find people? And then when you build in a subdivision, you build a spec, an inventory home. It's a house. It's built. It has a floor plan. It has paint. It has all. Okay, people either like it or they don't like it. But when you're going to build for someone, you're building custom. They don't just want what you got. It's custom. If they're going to, which is what I've learned, if they're going to spend the time and effort and energy and money and all that kind of stuff to build a custom home, they want what they want. They don't want my portfolio of 12 plans and you can move this wall if you want. That's not what they want to do. So I had to come up with a whole new way to do that, from home design to estimating to documentation, everything. And then the other big piece is if one time we built our highest volume year, we built 63, built and sold 63 homes, and probably, I don't know, 90% of those were finished or almost finished before they were sold. So you're not working with a client the whole time you're building the home. But when you're building custom homes, every home has a client with it, and every client has a unique personality, unique needs and wants, and all that kind of stuff. And so that adds another dimension that you have to figure out how to deal with. And so, man, it turns out building the house was the easy part. I can do that. But what about all that other stuff? So that was probably, it's one of those things I said before about you don't want to go through the grief, but you also wouldn't trade the lessons for anything. And, if I had known what I was going to have to do beforehand, I'm not sure I'd have done that. It was hard.
Right. But I mean,
Figure it out.
if I'd known what I know now, I might not have ever been an entrepreneur, right? I mean, it can be a
Right.
hard path. I mean, and a lot of
Yeah.
people say that. If I'd known how hard it was,
Right.
might not have done it. So that's
Yep.
good that we didn't. So I remember you sharing earlier that when you're building custom, all your mistakes show a lot better than when you're.
Yeah, there's that. So, I think of it because I have a manufacturing background, that job that I told you about where I knew I had to leave. I did learn about manufacturing. And one of the things that I learned is that now these are air conditioners. They weren't cars, but you could take it to that extreme. We're manufacturing a packaged heat and air unit. It's the kind that goes on rooftops. And when they came off the end of the assembly line and they were ready to be packaged, they were clean and shiny and they worked perfectly and it was all neat and tidy and everything. And that's what the client sees, what the customer sees. And that's what we all see in our modern manufactured world. You see the car not as it comes off the assembly line, you see it in the showroom where it's already been cleaned up and all that kind of stuff. But what you didn't see is when it was halfway down the assembly line and somebody dropped a wrench on the hood, and it had to be replaced or whatever. And we're all the time doing, air conditioner, the poor guy trying to braze, copper lines together, burns a hole in one of them and you got to replace it and all that kind of stuff. Well, the end user doesn't see that. But in building a home, it's out in the dirt and the weather, and it's done by subcontractors. You don't have direct control over their behavior, let's say. And they have employees. So, there's several, and so it's all done right out in the open. And so the client, the person who is in love, who has an emotional attachment to this product and sees it as a brand new thing, and then it gets a scratch or somebody puts a dirty handprint on a wall, or we put the roof on when the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour and the roof papers blow all over the 40 acres and the cows try to eat it and stuff like that. Those are the things that happen. Yeah, I didn't make that up. So,
well, and the client's so excited, they're probably visiting the site every day or almost every day just to see what's going on because they're so excited, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. They're visiting every day. In some cases, they live there. They literally live in a camper or something there or whatever it is. But yeah, so everything's under scrutiny, and you try to set expectations the best you can, and these things you tell people these things are going to happen, and I think they believe you on an intellectual level, but then when it actually happens, it's different. It's different when it's mine. It's one thing for you to tell me the story. It's a different thing when it's my home we're talking about. So that's another level. Yeah.
Well, and I shared a story. My parents have a log home and they built on land. And this was back when you were not doing that. But anyway, they had the log company all set up and they were all excited. And at the last minute, they changed their warranty and then they had to switch log companies at the last minute. And then the new log company showing up and they're delivering logs. And they said, you need to be careful pulling into that driveway. It's a tight squeeze. And it was a young kid who thought he knew how to drive a truck, took the turn too tight, dumped a whole truckload of logs all over the street, all over, and so that's one of those that my parents were like, but they saw it all happen. It wasn't just some random, that nobody saw. They saw it all. So
yeah, it's a very different impact, very emotional impact.
Yeah. I was like, so maybe we should buy a brick house, right?
Just buy something that it's already built.
Right.
Save yourself the
hassle.
Yeah.
So let's talk about building an A team. I know that you are big on employees and having the best team. And I know that you have a key employee who is very important to the success of your business. And you worked really hard to find ways to keep her and to keep her happy because you didn't want to lose her. So talk a little bit about how you've kept in key employees and or how you build an A team.
Yeah, that's a good question. So
2 questions, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's all of a piece. I think the first thing that you have to the first thing you have to get in your mind as an entrepreneur, when you are the guy or the woman doing all the stuff, you're emptying the trash, you're doing the books, you're doing all the stuff, and you created the company, you created the product and the marketing, all that stuff. It's kind of your baby. And you also are the only one who knows how to do it all. So by default, you're the one who does it best in the company because you're the only one, right? So you have to get your mind around the idea that you gotta hire people to do specific things. You get division of labor. You gotta hire an accountant who's better at accounting than you are. You gotta hire, in our case, let's say I've got to hire a project manager who's better at project managing than I am and can teach me how to do it. I've got to hire all those skill sets that are better at it than I am, and I've also got to hire a certain caliber of person, like character wise. Well, the first thing you have to do if you're A players, what we call A players, right? The A team. If you're gonna build an A team, you don't want to build a B team. You build an A team. Well, A players don't work for B players or C players. So you got to be, the way Darren Hardy would tell you, if you want organized people, you got to be the most organized. If you want driven people, if you want hardworking people, you got to be the most. Everything that you're looking for, you got to be the most in terms of, character attributes. So you got to look real hard at yourself and do that. And then you want to attract those kind of people. You have to be one of those kind of people to attract those kind of people. And you're going to attract what you, you're going to attract what you are. I think building a network, for example, the person that you mentioned, who I really consider more of a partner than an employee, but she's also been here a long time and has contributed a lot in terms of results and in terms of just blood, sweat, and tears, if you don't mind me using that term. Yeah. But I guess attracted her through my network, people that I knew well, that I had connection to. So building your community, your network, is critical in somebody in your network seeing that need and connecting you. So that's how I attracted her. Now, she said, I'd love to do this once we had gotten to know each other. I'd love to do this, but I have a family situation with a disabled child that I have to have flexibility in my time, my hours, and I have to have health insurance. At that time, we didn't have that. So I had to figure those things out. So matching what someone needs in their, like figuring out how to help your people achieve their goals by the way you structure your compensation is key. Mm-hmm. So part of her compensation wasn't money. It was flexible time. I don't want to pay her for her time or hours. I want to pay her for her results. So that was part of that matching. Okay, what is, I really want this person. How do I match her reward to what her goals are? And that's a big piece of it. And going a little further into that, just detail wise, and this is something that Darren teaches, is where I learned it, but we would try to reduce the performance of every job down to a couple of numbers that are objective. Everybody knows what they are. Everybody knows how they tie to the overall success of the company. And we've done that, for example, with sales. We know there's a key metric that boils down to appointments per week that I can measure. We can all measure every week. And we know, like a vending machine, if I have this many new appointments per week, that in a couple of months I'll have this many contracts. And so the person who's responsible for that, that's how she's measured. That's how her performance is measured. Very clear. It's very simple. And
very visible, right? It's visible to the whole team.
Yep.
Which creates accountability, right?
Yep. Yeah. Simple, it's clear, and it's certain. So she knows what she's got to do. And believe me, when it's clear and you got the right person in the job and it's clear, and you're kind of rewarding, I like to think of it as rewarding somebody for doing what they're going to do anyway. You got to find the right person. That's why I don't like the term incentive, because it implies that they wouldn't do it if you didn't incentivize them. But I think the reality is this is what they're going to do anyway. They're going to do it for whoever appreciates it the most. It's what they're going to do. So you find that person who can do that job, who's hardwired to do it and is good at it and wants to do it and has a good work ethic and all that other good stuff. And then you just figure out how to make them happier and happier the more and more they do it. And that's key.
And I think that goes, I mean, you touched on this a little bit, maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper, but the expression you hire for what they know and you fire for who they are. So I think there's a lot to be said for interviewing, not necessarily just for skills, but for the character traits you're looking for. So I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit or just be that.
Well, I think, that's, you have to have the character traits first. There's the concept of, there's three elements. There's, can they do the job? Will they do the job? And are they a good fit? And there's a lot more people that can do the job than will match the other two. So you definitely, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can teach skill wise. I can certainly teach you how to build a house pretty fast, but I can't teach you how to be honest and transparent and hardworking and
on time every day. Not let your personal life get in the way of your job. I've seen so many talented people that could be so successful if they'd let themselves. They can do the work, but often it's home life that's a disaster or this, that, or the other thing. And they can't, I mean, they have the skills and they could be great, but they just let other things. I find it tragic and sad, but
yeah, I agree.
You talked a little bit about kind of being who you want to hire, change starts with you. Lots of cliches we can throw at this, but I think for some business owners, and I'll be honest, I've struggled with this a little bit, hiring people who are better at you than a certain job. Okay, from my perspective, hiring an accountant or a bookkeeper that's better at bookkeeping than me should not be complicated. I'll own that one, but I have struggled to find good bookkeepers. So, but I mean, I'm in marketing. I need to hire marketing professionals and to swallow my pride a little bit and hire people who may know a little bit more about what we're doing here or there is that makes us a better team. But from my perspective, the ego of a business owner, that can be challenging. That's really what I'm getting at. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the struggles potentially to hiring people who are better than you are.
You said, the pride and ego, and that definitely gets in the way. And it gets in the way to the extent that you don't even know that it is in the way. That self-awareness of, am I not hiring because because of my ego, because I don't want to get shown up. It's hard to identify in yourself that's happening. Yeah. Now, but then there's another piece of that too. It's a control thing, not so much an ego or pride thing, but a control thing. You've done things a certain way for a certain amount of time. Somebody else, whether they're better at it than you are or not, they're going to do it a different way. They're going to do it their way. And that's another big struggle. And one, because you did it a certain way and it worked, and that's the only way as far as you're concerned. And then the other thing is there's a cost of mistakes that people will make, and they make them as they're learning or whatever. And it's hard to, we can make, to give you an example, like with a stroke of a pen or pencil, we can make a mistake that would cost $10,000 just by misreading a plan or doing something like that. And you have to learn those lessons. But if as the business owner, you could be doing something that generates an additional $100,000 in revenue or $1 million or whatever it is, you got to realize that $10,000 mistake that somebody else might make is just an investment in freeing up your time to do that other higher value thing. And man, that's hard to get your mind around when you see that mistake that you wouldn't have made, and they did, and it cost you, but you can't put your finger on the opportunity value of what you were doing while they were doing that.
Yeah.
Man, that's a hard one, but you got to do it or you never grow.
Yeah, I mean, one of my challenges with a marketing firm is if we make mistakes, we make them on social media or on email marketing. So they are very visible. And if that happens on a client site, then that client, I mean, it's a reputation on the line. So it can be very scary.
Yeah.
Yours is a bottom line number. Mine is very transparent. So we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome when we were discussing some of this. Imposter syndrome, if you don't know, is just feeling like I don't really know what I'm doing. You talked about learning to build a business. Talk about imposter syndrome. I think it's a real issue for small business owners. And so share your journey with that and any advice you might have to give about it.
Well, I think everybody suffers from it, but very few people recognize that they suffer from it and recognize that they're not the only one. So I had one time joined, it was a coaching group. It was a Darren Hardy kind of private coaching group. It was very expensive. And the kind of people that were in the room, I remember the first meeting. We sat down in someplace in San Diego in a hotel that I couldn't afford to stay in. And I looked around the room at these people who I was definitely in the bottom 5% or 1% or something in terms of financial success. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm in the wrong group. I don't belong in here with these people. And as we went around the room introducing ourselves, I said something that Darren picked up on. He's that kind of guy. Picked up on. He said, "You need to tell me more about that." And I think I explained how I don't think I feel like I belong in this group. And he looked around and he said, "Okay, who else feels that way?" Everybody raised their hand. And he launched into that explanation. He said, "Okay, this is imposter syndrome. When you kind of wake up every morning and hope this isn't the day that everybody figures out you don't know what you're doing." He suffers from it. He says that's his biggest fear is somebody's going to find out or everybody's going to find out that he really doesn't know what he's talking about. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't know what he's talking about. What it means is that we all have that internal fear. But if you're all by yourself, and an entrepreneurship is inherently lonely, you're all by yourself and you're the only boss in the company. You're the only owner in the company and you're the only one in your position. So you think you're the only one that has that sense or that feeling. And believe me, you are not. Yeah. In fact, you're in the majority by a lot. So for me, that helped. It doesn't mean the imposter syndrome goes away, because it doesn't. What it means is that it's normal and it's okay. And it's, it is what it is. We're all doing that. We're all thinking that we're waiting for the other shoe to fall.
Well, we're all learning as we go. I mean, again, I hate to keep coming back to marketing, but it changes all the time. The digital marketing landscape is constantly changing. So you have to stay on top of it all the time. I don't know. Home building is home building, but it's not static. It's dynamic. Yeah. Everything's always changing. Price, cost, laws, regulations.
Yeah. The market, the economy, the needs of the customer. Yeah. Yeah. It's totally dynamic. I don't think any business is static like that, except maybe utilities.
Government jobs. Okay, so let's go back to coaching, mentoring, peer groups, all that, because I know you've spent a lot of time and energy and made a very large investment into that. So talk about the role that all of that has played in your career.
It has a lot of different facets. The learning part, you should always be learning skills that you need. I mean, I learned to be a sales professional, and I hated it. I didn't want to do it, and I avoided it as long as I could, but I knew I needed to do it. So I learned it. That's great. The coaching, like peer coaching groups where you and I met, there's two elements. There's the learning. You learn from each other. You learn from people who've been through situations that you have not encountered before. And that's hugely valuable, not only for the skills that you learn, but for the perspective that you get. Oh, I'm not the only one who's ever dealt with this. Oh, I'm not a complete screw up just because I did this, or I'm in this position or whatever. I'm just another entrepreneur. And The perspective, I think one of the most valuable things is the perspective on failure, and that failure is the path to your ultimate success. You have to experience it. You have to go through it. You're not pushing hard enough if you don't go through failure, and that you can survive it and go through it and become better because of it. So I think that's a big part of the development, like you talked about the coaching and that sort of, all those sort of things, is the groups that you meet, the people that you meet, and the associations that you make, and the long lasting relationships with people that you can call up and talk to about things. I've been in a group of home builders from different, organized through the National Association of Home Builders. We're all in different markets, and we gather twice a year for basically peer coaching and mentoring. I've been in that group, that same group, since 2005.
Wow.
We've all been through all kinds of crazy things and all together. And these are guys that I see twice a year, but I could call right now and get advice on anything that I have run into. And I can find somebody in the group who's been through it. And that's huge. So, you get, kind of to summarize that, using the Darren Hardy group as an example, you get you got to find the right mentor, the right teacher. And that right mentor is going to also attract the kind of people that you want to have as peers. So there's both those elements, I think, really go together. They both have huge value.
Well, and I think that goes to having kind of accountability partners too. You talked earlier about, the entrepreneurial journey being lonely. It is lonely at the top. And, having people to bounce those ideas off, having people who've been there where you are can make it less lonely and can really help you learn from those mistakes. If I can go back just a little bit, one of our listeners weighed in on imposter syndrome, and she said she struggles with it every day. And the good quote is, the only person you should try to be better than is who you were yesterday. So that goes really to Darren Hardy too, which is better every day, right? So that's a great quote. Thank you, Michelle.
Yes. Agree with that 100%.
Yeah. I always say the only mistakes that you really make are the ones you don't learn from. So, so if you could give, thank you for your time. Let's wrap up with any advice you could give to entrepreneurs or people thinking of taking the leap of faith, or people struggling in their business right now, or just in general, this entrepreneurial journey. What words of wisdom can you give?
I've already said it, but I'll just to emphasize it, find a group, find a group of peers, high performing peers that you feel like are kind of above your pay grade, if you will. Figure out how to join that group, whether it's TAB or a Darren Hardy thing or Entrepreneur Organization, EO. There are a lot of those groups out there. Find one, and join it, and go religiously. Find that group. There's a book, read The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. It's a Darren Hardy book, but it gives great perspective and even how-tos on entrepreneurship and the journey. Just study all of that you can. Learn all the skills that you need to learn. Become a salesperson. Nothing happens until someone sells something. And I'd say the other thing is, know that failure is inevitable and it's part of your journey to success. And don't ever think that you can avoid failure, and don't ever think that a failure of a specific thing in your business reflects on you as a person, because it doesn't. If anything, it makes you better. So,
and don't ever think that those bigwigs that have made it big overnight didn't deal with failure, right?
Everybody. Oh, right. And there's no such thing as overnight success anyway. So yeah, you only hear about it after it's happened. So it seems like it's overnight, but yeah.
Right. All right. Well, that was great. Any final words?
Just go set your goals, find an accountability partner. I think I meant to say that earlier. And just don't let setbacks stop you.
Well, and I was going to say, you said read everything you can, do everything you can. So you get prepare. I'm not ready yet to make the leap. I'm not ready. So when's a good time to make the leap? How do I know when it's?
Yeah. You just got to do it. You're never going to be ready. Right. So
Jump off the high dive.
Do it.
Yeah. I think some people get caught in analysis paralysis. No, I just gotta, there's never really a great time. You just gotta take the dive.
Oh, I'm the king of that. Yeah. Getting ready. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Tim, for your time today. I appreciate it. If you would like to learn more about Tim or his business, you can go to his website. That's turnerandsonhomes.com. One son, many homes. So, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, follow me on YouTube or subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Follow me on LinkedIn. We're working on getting this out to as many people as possible. And just to clarify, these are real entrepreneurs. These are not necessarily clients of mine. I'm not necessarily clients of theirs. Tim talked a lot about learning from people who've gone before you. And that's really what this podcast is really designed for, is just to talk to entrepreneurs about their struggles to help all of us. We're all in this really together. So if you liked it, stay tuned for next month on September 29th at noon. We will be interviewing Dave Young with FlexiTrack and Progressive Stamping. So we hope to see you soon. Thanks, Tim. It was great.
You bet. Thank you, Tracy. We'll see you.
See ya.